And welcome to the PE Classroom's GCSE PE exam walkthrough for OCR GCSE PE. Before I begin, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Emily and I'm one of the creators of the PE Classroom's resources that you might use in your lessons. Within this session, I will be giving an overview of your GCSE PE exam, as well as giving you a tutorial on how to recognise and answer different questions that will come up on your paper. We will be able to go through different assessment objectives during the session, as well as extended questions that you'll find at the end of your paper. You will also have the chance to complete some of the questions and some example questions and be able to have AI mark it for you and provide feedback. In order for you to do that, there are some resources on the main revision hub page that you need to download. So if you would like to pause the video and download them resources now, then you can do so, just so that you've got them ready for when I tell you to pause the video. All of the example questions and the practice questions are taken from paper 1, so they only focus on topics from paper 1. If you haven't got them opened, then if you just want to pause the video and do so, feel free to pause the video throughout the session as well, as some of the questions that I go through I give answers for, but you might want to try and obviously answer them before I give the answers. It's completely up to you. Okay, so let's get started then. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the OCR 2 papers. So you have paper 1, which is an hour long. It is out of 60 marks and it is 30% of your GCSE. The topics that are covered are anatomy and physiology, movement analysis, physical training, and there will be one extended answer as well towards the end of the paper. The use of data will be in questions throughout the paper, so you want to keep an eye out for them as well. Okay, and then paper 2 overview, again it's an hour, it is 60 marks in total, and again it is 30% of your GCSE, but the topics that are covered are health, fitness and well-being, sports psychology and socio-cultural influences, and again there'll be one extended answer towards the end, and you will have the use of data questions throughout the paper as well. Okay, so that is just a really quick overview of the 2 papers. About the session then, so the session is going to look at the different assessment objectives, which are essentially how you are assessed throughout the paper and in your exam. So every question that you answer the paper will be linked to an assessment objective, and in order for you to know how to answer that, you need to know, well, what are the assessment objectives and how do I answer that? So the first one is AO1, and that requires you to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of a topic. So you'll be given a question and you just need to simply recall some facts, describe something, really, really brief, using key terms. You just got to demonstrate that knowledge that you have. AO2 is questions are about applying your knowledge and your understanding of something to a sporting example or a scenario. So again, you are looking to use the knowledge that you have from an AO1 type question, but you're then having to apply that knowledge by providing sporting examples or answering the question about a specific sport scenario. And then AO3 questions, so the slightly harder ones, they are require you to answer more in-depth information and give that. So you have to analyse and evaluate the factors or the topic that you have been given. So providing more detail, explaining something a little bit more detail and giving an outcome and an impact of something. So they are your 3 assessment objectives. So each of the questions in the paper will be linked to one or more than one of these assessment objectives. And we're going to go through and break down how you answer them. In order to answer them, you need to know and be familiar with the different command words that can be used in each AO. So if you see the word identify, state, give, describe, etc., that is normally linked to an AO1 question. So immediately we know that it's only asking for a very small bit of information, whether that's a one-word answer, a small phrase, a description of something. So if it says, state so-and-so, you would need to obviously literally just state the fact. You state what it is. Some stats for you then. On average for your paper 1 and your paper 2, there is approximately 25 marks up for grabs for AO1 on your paper 2 and 27 marks up for grabs for AO1 on paper on paper 2. So essentially, if you have a base understanding of all of the topics that you have had to learn, and you can recall all of the information and just answer all of them AO1 questions, you could get a third of your paper, a third of the marks on your paper just from answering the AO1 questions. AO2 questions then, looking for that explain, analyse or discuss command word. So again, if you see any of them, you know that you might need to provide a little bit more information or link it to a sport, or link it to a sport scenario or give a sporting example. Again, on average for paper 1 there are 20 marks, and on paper 2 there are 19 marks up for grabs for AO2 questions. AO3 questions, you are looking for the words analyse, discuss, justify or evaluate. So again, if on the paper you see any of these command words, you know that you need to break it down even further and provide a lot more in-depth analysis to do with the question. Again, a 15 mark approximately on your paper 1 and 14 marks approximately on your paper 2. So a smaller amount of what the paper is, but again, if you can get them get some marks on that, then again you do quite well. Couple of helpful tips then. So like I've already said, essentially if you ensure that you have a base knowledge of all topics, enough to gain at least all of your AO1 marks that are on offer, you're getting a third of the marks just on that one paper. So that's a huge amount, just through simply stating things, recalling facts and just tapping into that knowledge that you have. My second tip would be to be really familiar with lots of different sporting examples, a range of sports, just so that you can gain them AO2 marks. Quite a lot of the questions are really easy in terms of just asking you to provide a sporting example to do with the topic, and if you have good sporting knowledge, they are easy marks for you to pick up as well. Okay then, so we're going to make a start then. So like I said, we're going to look at the different assessment objective questions. So first of all, we're going to take a look at AO1 questions. So we're going to look at what it assesses. So essentially, like I've said, you're recalling facts, terms, definition. So do you know the definition of something? Do you know what something is? You've just got to demonstrate that knowledge. In terms of what question might look like, they might be multiple choice questions, they might be one word questions or very short mark answers, so a short phrase which is just worth 1 mark, or you can get questions where they are alongside an AO2 and an AO3 marks, so they can be worth 2 to 3 marks, but it simply is just an AO1 point followed by an AO2 or an AO3 point. How you answer it, generally with a 1 word, a short phrase, some concise description or definition. So yeah, keep it brief, essentially just state the fact, do not waffle. So I've got some examples then for you of what would typically be just a 1 mark question that is worth that is equivalent to the AO1 objective. So here we've got the first thing to recognise is from the question is the command word. So we've got state and we've got name. Okay, so these will give you an indication that already it's an AO1 type question. It just wants you to simply state something or name something. As these questions are both worth 1 mark each, they have the simple command word, and so you just need to apply that knowledge. So question 1, name the structure labelled in A, and there it is. So you can see it's to do with the respiratory system. You've got A there, and it's just simply asking you to name the structure. So answer 1 would be the alveoli. Okay, and then question number 2, state the name of the fitness test that measures how quickly you can change direction. So it's wanting you to recognise that what component of fitness suits for the agility test, and you obviously need to be able to name it. Okay, so they are simply just 1 mark questions that are just for AO1 questions. Now we're going to look at still AO1 questions, but you might have multiple marks up for grabs. So I'm just going to point out to you here, in this question here, there are actually 4 marks up for grabs in total. So it says state the name of the labelled muscles, which obviously you've got the diagram there, worth 2 marks, and then state the function of the labelled muscles, again worth 2 marks. So in this question, you would just have to identify the 2 muscles and then state the function of what they do in the body. So even though it's worth 4 marks, they are still only AO1 type questions. So you are just recalling a fact, you're stating something very, very simple. So that should be easy 4 marks to pick up if you just know your muscles and what they do in the body. Okay, and there obviously are the answers. So you would get 4 marks if you were to say anything along them lines there. Question 2, describe the range of movement possible at a hinge joint. So again, it says it's worth 2 marks. So you need to be thinking, well, what do I need to do to get these 2 marks? And because it just says describe the range of movement possible, just describe 2 different movements that a hinge joint provides. So you would get marks for saying it allows flexion extension, the angle at the joint increases or decreases. Any of them, or they're obviously, you could say any of them, you'd get 2 marks, easy. Okay, so the next question, a little bit harder, but it's still got an AO1 mark in it. So here it's worth 2 marks in total, but it's actually saying give one feature of the alveoli, which we know give is a command word for an AO1 question, but it also says and explain how its function benefits during exercise. So we need to recognise that it's asking us to explain something, so it wants us to provide more detail. So essentially you're going to get 1 mark for giving the feature and 1 mark for explaining it. Okay, so an answer that you could give, it has thin walls or is 1 cell thick. That would get you 1 mark because it's a feature of an alveoli. And then you can get another mark by saying this means that there is a small distance for the oxygen or carbon dioxide to pass through, which allows for faster gas exchange. So you would get a 2nd mark by explaining, how that function of the alveoli benefits during exercise. So it essentially means you get more oxygen to the muscles. So that is an AO1 question within an AO2 point as well, because the explanation is that AO2 point that we've just discussed. Okay, so if you would like to pause the video and click on the AO1 questions that are available on the Revision Hub page, you can have a go at them and the AI will mark it for you and you can see how you can do. Okay, welcome back then. So we are just going to take a look now at the AO2 types of questions. Okay, so it tests your ability to apply your knowledge and understanding to a context. So like I said before, linking to a sporting example in some way. You might need to use relevant examples to show your understanding of the concept. So if you're given a topic and it's asking you about a sporting example, you need to be able to talk about that example to show your understanding of that topic. The question could come in a multiple choice again. It could be a 1-word or a short answer. Or it could actually be, again, like similarly to the AO1 question, it could be alongside either an AO1 point or an AO3 point. So again, it's worth a few more marks, but there is an AO2 point in there somewhere. And we're looking at how we break that down and recognise that. How you answer it, you need to first consider the amount of marks that it's asking of you, so that gives you an indication of how many points you need to make. Does it tell you to relate to a sporting example, or does it already give you a sporting example? And consider whether you need to demonstrate your knowledge first before applying that example. So you might need to do something before you give that sporting example. Okay, so the first thing then we're going to look at is just singular AO2 mark, so just worth 1 mark. So give 1 example of a games player working anaerobically in their sport. So essentially this is asking you, it's a similar question to AO1 where it's got that command word give. So we need to be able to recognise that, okay, well, give is worth 1 mark in is that AO1 question. But actually, because this is saying 1 example of a games player working anaerobically, you know that it's suggesting that you need to apply that knowledge you have to an example. So we know that it's an AO2 as opposed to an AO1. So for this, apply your knowledge of anaerobic exercise. So think about, what does anaerobic mean? So that's kind of like the knowledge side of it, would be an AO1 point if you had to describe what anaerobic exercise is, but because it's asking you to apply your knowledge to an example, that is AO2. So you could say sprinting for a loose ball, jumping to head a ball, serving in tennis, etc., etc. Our second question, similar to an AO1 question where it's a multiple choice question. So which one of the following muscles contracts to bring about extension at the hip? So because it's similar to an AO1, but the wording of the question makes it an AO2 question, as it is requiring you to apply your knowledge of muscles contracting so that to allow that extension at the hip. So you need to have a knowledge, or a good knowledge of your muscles to know, okay, well, which muscle is contracting to allow extension at the hip. So you've got applying that knowledge of the muscles to identify the gluteals as allowing extension at the hip. Okay, so now we're just going to take a look at multiple AO2 marks. So questions that are worth more than 1 mark, but the points you need to make are both AO2 points. So we have here question 1. Chris has a resting heart rate of 50 beats per minute. Explain why Chris's heart rate is higher at the start of the race than his resting heart rate. So essentially, at this point, you need to recognise that explain is that command word for AO2 points. Okay, so knowing already that explain, you're going to need to add a bit more detail than just describing something. The wording of the question doesn't give any indication that there is an AO1 mark available there. Doesn't imply that you need to recall anything, describe anything. It's just asking you to explain why something has happened. So essentially for this question, you need to apply your knowledge of heart rate and how it changes during exercise to provide the answer. So you could say something like that he may have had an elevated heart rate by warming up. So as he warms up, his heart rate will obviously increase. Or you could say that the hormone adrenaline is released, and so again that can give him an increase in his heart rate. So any of them kind of points you would get 2 marks for. The second question is asking you to describe 2 benefits of cooling down after a basketball game. We recognise this question again as an AO2 point, even though it's got that command word describe, which we associate with AO1. It's actually asking for 2 benefits of a cool down after a basketball game. So it's asking us about a sporting example. It's not. It's also not asking us just to identify a phase of the cool down. So it's not saying what is a phase of the cool down, give a benefit, because that would be AO1 and then an AO2 point. These are 2 AO2 points straight away. So to answer this, simply think about what knowledge you know of cool downs and then give 2 benefits of it. So you could say something like it gradually lowers heart rate, or it speeds up the recovery of waste products or lactic acid. So you would get, again, 2 marks there. Okay, so now we're just going to take a look at AO2 marks that might be alongside an AO1 or an AO2 point. So first of all, we can see already that both questions ask you to explain. So that is the command word, so we can recognise that they are AO2 points already. We can see that also 2 marks are up for grabs for both questions. So there's obviously more than 1 point that we need to make. So explain which one of the training methods from continuous, plyometric and weight training Remy should use the most to improve his performance in 10,000 metres. So essentially this question is asking you which one is most relevant for a 10,000 metre runner. So you need to be able to essentially have knowledge on what these methods of training train for, but it's not asking you to describe them, it's asking you, okay, which one? So in order for us to make a decision on which one, we need to have that knowledge in the first place. And essentially link it to which one is most beneficial for a 10,000 metre runner. So by identifying the correct training method that is relevant to the event is your AO2 point, because it's linking our knowledge and applying our knowledge of training methods to the sporting example, and then giving your reason as to why this is the best one to improve the performance would be an AO3 point. So your answer could be something like continuous training is to improves cardiovascular fitness so he can work aerobically for longer, or his muscles have enough oxygen to maintain his pace. So any relevance to the fact that he needs obviously good cardiovascular endurance would get you at least 1 mark. Now the next question, explain one reason why a shot putter would use the vertical jump test. So for this question, before you obviously decide why they might need to use the vertical jump test, you need to be able to think about what the vertical jump test tests for. So straight away we know that we need to demonstrate our knowledge of the vertical jump test. So we would essentially need to say it tests for power, and then link that to a reason why the shot put test would be relevant for the performer. So it tests for power would be our AO1 point, which the shot putter needs to throw the shot a long way. So you can either talk about power in the arms, power in the legs, how that improves their overall performance. Okay, so there are now AO2 questions available for you in the resource on the Revision Hub. So if you'd like to download them and have a go at them and get some feedback from AI, and then you can come back to the video. Okay, welcome back. So now we're going to take a look at the AO3 questions. So this is questions that require a lot more in-depth knowledge. You may need to break something down. You might have to weigh up the pros and the cons of something or compare something to get them higher marks. So AO3 questions assess the ability to analyse a situation or a performance. So being able to break something down and say why this is happening, explain it in some more in-depth way. You may have to evaluate the effectiveness of something, so giving your opinion about why something is better or not as good as something else. And you may have to justify decisions with your reasons, so drawing on conclusions based on things you've said and say why you think this. So the questions to get. The question, some of the questions come as an analyse an action or a movement type question, or it asks you to analyse some data. You may have to give your opinion, and also similarly to AO1 and AO2 questions, they also it could come as part of a question with the other assessment objectives. In terms of how you answer it, again, consider the amount of points that you need to make. If it says 3 marks, you might need to make 3 points. Does it tell you to relate specifically to a sporting example? Explain how and why something is effective or not in the scenario, so you may have to do that. And use linking phrases like this means that, or as a result of this, this is because. Them type of connecting phrases will help you to really answer the question. Okay, so first of all then we're going to look at singular AO3 marks. So generally these are just worth 1 mark. So again we have an example, which one of the following is the correct rating for a female who scored 32 in the grip dynamometer test? So you know that it is worth 1 mark, it says that. This type of question is asking you to analyse the data. So it's an AO3 question because you've got to look at the data you've been given and then give an answer based off that. So for this, it says that the person is female. So you must make sure that you're looking at the row for the female. That is always a mistake that people make. They just get overexcited and think, oh, easy question. And they look at the male one by accident or vice versa. It is then saying about they scored 32, and so the answer would be good. So you just simply, it's just right, good. You get the mark. The next type of question is it's asking you to state something. So we know state to be the command word similar to AO1 questions. However, this is asking you to state the lever system used in the sporting action. So you have got to analyse the action that you see and be able to then obviously apply your knowledge to that question. These tend to come up quite a lot. So 1 mark questions that are about lever systems, planes or axes, they're really classic questions to get as an AO3 question. So here you just simply need to look at the action that has taken place, so the kicking of a ball, and analyse and decide which lever system you think it is an example of. So long as in this scenario you know your different lever systems and you know examples of them, then you will get the mark on this. Now we're going to take a look at multiple AO3 marks, so something that is worth more than 1 mark. But it is still an AO3 type of question. So again, like I said previously, we've got that classic analyse the plane and axis used to perform this movement. So the key command word there is analyse. We've got that for both questions. So we know already that it's likely to be an AO3 question. And it's asking us to analyse the plane and axis used in this movement here, which is a cartwheel. So we need to use our knowledge of what are different planes and axes, figure out, okay, well, what axis and what plane does a cartwheel move around, and that's how we then come up with the answer. And you'll notice it's worth 2 marks because obviously it asks for the plane and the axis. So if you only give 1, you only get 1 mark. So they're both AO3 marks, but it's just 2 answers that it's looking for. And there's your answer there. The second question, analyse the lever system used in the sporting actions below. Again, this is very similar to the previous question, but it is 3 marks, so it wants you to analyse 3 different sporting examples and give the answer. It's worth noting that these require the answers require no connection between them because they're asking you specifically to answer each action, so that each one is worth 1 mark. So your answers could be the first one, so swinging the lower leg forward to kick a ball would be the 3rd class lever, heading a ball would be first, and going up onto your tiptoes as you serve in tennis would be an example of a 2nd class lever. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at AO3 marks that are part of a question alongside other marks that are available for the other assessment objectives. So again, you're most likely to be able to see here that it's worth more than 1 mark, and you need to apply other bits of knowledge before you answer the question. So straight away we have the command word of justify. So we now know that justify is a command word for an AO3. So you already recognise that it's likely to be an AO3 question. So justify using the ratings in the table, which athlete would most likely be chosen to run a 3,000 metre race. So again, we've got to analyse some data here. So we know that it's kind of an AO3 question. So simply analysing the data would be our AO3, one of the AO3 points. It's obviously worth 3 marks. You then need to give a reason for why you've selected this athlete. So it's another AO3 mark. And because it's asking you about applying your knowledge, so you've essentially to know what type of race a 3,000 metre race would be. So you'd need to recognise that it's a long distance race, therefore the Cooper 12-minute run is what the component fitness that is needed for it. And that's essentially how you figure out what athlete it is. Okay, so 3,000 metre, they obviously need 12 cardiovascular fitness. And out of these 3 athletes, we can see that athlete 2 has an excellent rating. So we know that athlete 2, as they have the highest or the excellent rating for aerobic endurance, which they will need to delay, fatigue, or work aerobically. So we're linking the fact that if they have good aerobic endurance, they will be able to continue for longer without getting tired. Question 2 then, slightly different in terms of how you answer it. It's still worth 3 marks, so you know you need to roughly make 3 points. Firstly, you would need to demonstrate your knowledge of a long-term effect. So it says explain the benefit of one long-term effect of the cardiovascular system for a long-distance runner. So we recognise this as an AO2 or an AO3 question. It's asking us to explain the benefit of a long-term training effect. So first of all, we would need to identify a long-term training effect of the cardiovascular system. If you talked about another system, you would not get a mark. So if I demonstrate my knowledge of what is a long-term effect of the CV system, 1 mark, that's you're demonstrating the knowledge for your AO1. You then obviously need to explain the effect that it would have on and how it would benefit a long distance runner, and essentially say why you think that. So for this, you could say, obviously there's plenty of answers you could say for this, but an increased resting stroke volume would be your 1 mark. So more blood leaves the heart, so that there's an increase in oxygen delivery, and then therefore they can work aerobically for longer, or without getting fatigued. So that would be your 3 marks there. So this is quite a simple question in terms of, like, it's got an AO1 point, an AO2 point, and then an AO3 point, because you've got to explain your reasoning and how that affects them in that sport. Okay, so if you would now like to pause the video and have a go at the AO3 questions that are available to download, and then you can meet me back here in a second. Okay, so we're now going to take a look at the extended answer questions. So these are towards the end of the paper, and I think generally people get scared of these questions because they think they're worth a lot of marks, but actually if you break it down, you can achieve some marks in it. So these type of questions, they assess all of the skills that you've just learnt. So you being able to demonstrate your knowledge for an AO1 point, you then being able to apply your knowledge to a sporting example, which is your AO2 point, followed by that analysis, the evaluation, whatever the question's asking, for your AO3 point. So all of the skills together. Generally, it will be either a evaluate, explain, or a describe command word. So you would just need to recognise what command word it is using, and then know how you answer the question to get them marks. A top tip that I would recommend in terms of answering it is always underline key information for the question, give brief introduction and conclusions, figure out how you want to split up the question. Generally, you can split the question into 2 parts and answer them almost separately. And then obviously also make sure you're making all of your points to get all of the marks that are up for grabs for each of the AOs. Within an extended question, there are different languages or keywords, key phrases that you can use, which will really help you to structure your answer. So I'm not going to read them all out, but if you get an evaluate question, it means you need to consider both sides of the argument. So you could talk about strengths and weaknesses, advantages, disadvantages, saying in contrast, whereas this has happened, etc. Explain questions, you need to say why, how, or when something has happened. So you could use phrases like, this is because, this means that, as a result of this, etc. Excuse me. And then describe questions, ask you to give details of something. So again, you could say the features of this are, this looks like, whatever is relevant. Feel free to obviously use them command words when you answer the exam questions in a minute. So when I get a 6-mark question, the first thing that I want to be doing is obviously reading the question and possibly highlighting any things that I need to know. So Mason is a sprinter. Sprinters require high levels of power and speed to perform well. Describe 2 different types of training Mason might use as part of his fitness program. Explain a long-term benefit of exercise on the cardiovascular system. So I'm just going to take a highlighter and we're going to highlight key parts of the question so we can identify what it is we need to do. So we know the sport that we're talking about is a sprinter. A bit of key information it gives us is they need power and speed. So that might be something we need to refer to. Describe is our first command word. So we know already that we've just got to recall some facts, give some brief knowledge. And it's asking for 2 different types of training that Mason might use that is relevant for sprinting. The second part of the question, explain a long-term benefit of the cardiovascular system for Mason. Okay, and again, it's worth obviously noting it's 6 marks. So from this question, we are taking all of the key bits, and now we know what we need to maybe do in terms of making a plan. It's worth noting that for 6 markers like this is always the breakdown. So there are always 2 marks up for grabs for an AO1, 2 marks up for AO2, and 2 marks for AO3. So essentially, you need to make 2 points for each assessment objective. I always advise that you need to make a brief plan so that you know what you want to say for each parts of the question. It also helps to keep your paragraphs really concise and to the point. Now, depending on what the command words in the question are and which topics they are linked to, will depend on how you might structure this. So we can see that the first part of the question is describe 2 methods of training that are relevant for a sprinter. So we know that describe is an AO1 and an AO2 command word. And because it's asking us about relating it to a sprinter, that's your AO2 points. Apologies, keep clicking the wrong way. So my AO1 points, so what knowledge do I need to talk about? Well, we need to essentially recognise what 2 methods of training train power and speed. It's told us that they need high levels of power and speed. So what methods of training do we need to talk about? So interval training and plyometric training are 2 methods of training that you can talk about. So essentially, if you just, obviously this is just your plan, so you just know what points you need to make, but you know that you need to state or describe them. You then know that you need to apply your knowledge of these methods of training to sprinting. So you might talk about that obviously interval training improves speed, intense sprint intervals, and then rest in between is how they would obviously train using interval training. And then make a point about plyometric training power, in which case he needs to, for a push-off at the start out of the blocks. So already you're linking it to your sporting examples. Now, the last part of the question asks you to explain long-term benefits. So we kind of know that, there's 2 parts to this question. They're not directly linked, so we don't need to make any AO3 points about these bits here because the question was asking us to describe it. So that's kind of, that part of the question is done. There's no more in-depth analysis or evaluation. Now, the points obviously that you can make about your long-term benefits. So you essentially just need to explain a long-term benefit and then talk about how it helps the sprinter with their performance. And again, to point out, it asks about a cardiovascular system benefit. If you talk about anything else, you wouldn't get the marks. So we're just going to take a look at a model answer for it so that you can physically see it all together. So my first point, I'm tackling the 2 different training methods. So I've got interval training is a repeated sets of work followed by rest and recovery. So that's my AO1 point about interval training. In training, Mason would use short but intense work periods to improve his speed, followed by recovery periods before then doing another sprint interval. Short sprint intervals allow him to work at a higher rate for short periods of time. So that's me applying my knowledge of interval training to a sprinter and how it benefits them. My next point then was about my plyometric training. So I state my knowledge that I know about plyometric training, followed by how this is going to help him with his sprinting performance. So we know that obviously if he has better power in his legs, he's going to be able to push off more in the blocks at the start and accelerate quicker, which will then obviously improve his speed and give him a better start at the race. We're now going to tackle the explain part of the question. So from our plan, we said that we were going to talk about a cardiovascular system benefit. So here we've obviously said, apologies, I keep clicking the wrong way. Said about that he will have a faster or shorter recovery rate. So that is a long-term benefit. We're stating a fact. We're then talking about in a bit more detail to ensure we get them AO3 points. So how does a faster or shorter recovery rate benefit him? So having a faster recovery rate means his heart rate will return to resting rate faster after doing an interval sprint, which means he'll recover quicker in between the sprint intervals. As a result of this, he will be able to do more sprint intervals, therefore training more and overall impacting his sprint performance. So we've then obviously gone into that more detail and provide a really in-depth analysis of how that long-term effect is going to benefit him in his sprinting performance. So that's an example of how you could answer the end question, the 6 marker. So essentially, you need to make sure that you're tackling each point to ensure you're getting all of the marks that are available. You could try and finish with a conclusion if you thought that the question was asking for it. But yeah, just assess what the question is asking. And like I said, the plan helps you to figure out what you need to say. So now you can go off and have a go at the 6 mark question. There are multiple questions that you can have a go at, so if you would like to have a go at both or just one of them, it's completely up to you. You could also have a second try if you wanted to see if you can improve your score.